Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 37
Woohoo!
of Get the Flick Out of Here. I'm your host, Alex Pawlowski. With me, as always, is Kate Elizabeth. Kate, last week we said, we should follow the zeitgeist. We should strike while that iron is hot, and we should watch Velma. And that turned out to be a colossal mistake. And they were like, well, maybe let's go back to the other thing we used to do, which is to review 30-year-old movies. And
with a mad scientist element, we cannot get away from a mad scientist.
No, we can't get away from a mad scientist. This has got to be there. But I think we made a good choice here. At least for the entertainment value. We are reviewing Gremlins 2, the new batch, starring G.I. Zmo, a real Maguire-can hero. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. If you are battling Gremlins in downtown high rise, it's Gremlins 1. I think more people are familiar with. It's a classic. It's an incredibly original thing. Came out in 84, 85. Small, sleepy New England town taken over by creatures, and there's starts out with a mogwai, very cute little furry thing with big ears, and there's 3 rules. You can't get them wet.
Don't talk about them. Wrong movie. My bad.
That's Fight
Sorry.
Club.
Apologies.
It's very similar. It's a very similar feel to it.
It's true.
Yep. But no. So first of all, sunlight kills them instantly, and they hate any kind of bright light. Okay, so keep them away from that. 2, you can't get them wet because they'll multiply. Which is a weird thing, but apparently that's the rule. And then the third one is you can't feed them after midnight, because if they do, that's when they metamorphose from these cute little furry things into evil, slightly larger green slimy things with big teeth that are gremlins. They
and
want to destroy
boils
everything.
on their back in the process.
So those are the things. Then what the main character of the first one is a young man named Billy Peltzer, who is freshly out of college and working as a bank teller. But what he wants to do is like be a graphic designer, but they didn't have graphic designers back then. You would just like draw things on a big piece of paper. And anyway, so he's the main character. His dad, who is an inventor, gets him a mogwai from a weird Chinese curio shop, and gives it to him. Of course, all the rules are immediately broken, mostly because of Corey Feldman, which happens in most movies. And then so everything goes haywire, and they have to fight all the gremlins in their small town. There's also Phoebe Cates, who is Billy Peltzer's girlfriend. In the first one, the scene that has become part of, I believe, American folklore at this point is the scene where she explains why she hates Christmas, which is the saddest monologue anyone's ever written or delivered in the history of film. That her father wanted to surprise them one Christmas by coming down the chimney dressed as Santa, and he slipped and he broke his neck and was stuck in the chimney. And the only way they found this out is that his body started to decompose, and they smelled their dead father in the chimney. They thought it was a bird, but they looked up there and it wasn't a bird, it was Dad. And it's the saddest thing ever. And it comes so far out of left field in a movie about like, hey, let's fight these troublemaking green things. No, wait, I want to take a side note and tell you about the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody ever.
She was great in this too. Like in the scene and in the whole movie, she was like so fantastic, especially considering the world that she was operating in.
So those are the things. Eventually, They are able to destroy all of the bad guys. Gizmo's the only one that never actually turns to become evil. And they take him back to the Chinese old man at the curio shop and give him back because no one can really truly care for one of these things because something's going to go wrong. So that's the end of the first movie, 1985-ish, right? So 1990 is when the sequel is, which we're talking about here. So it's been 5 years. They're living in New York now. Billy is like part of the design team at a huge. Gosh, I don't know how to describe it because he can't. The bad guy. He's not a bad guy. He's actually one of the good guys. The billionaire Daniel Clamp, who runs Clamp Incorporated or whatever, is the first ever tech bro without actually tech being involved in any way.
Felt very Ted Turner, Donald Trump parody-y, like very he's overseeing the networks. Like
yeah, he's a perfect he was supposed to be a perfect conglomeration of Ted Turner, who's the cable billionaire, and Donald Trump because he's a land developer in New York. And he's also not Donald Trump, he's Daniel Clamp. Right. So it's obvious. Here's the thing. Looking back on it now, who this guy actually is a parody of is Elon Musk. That's who this guy is actually a parody of, but they didn't know who Elon Musk was at the time.
Of course.
Nobody like Elon Musk even existed. But the fact is that he is in charge of a huge company, and he has no idea how any of the shit works. So he's the brilliant genius behind everything, but he's entirely clueless about all of
anything. Yep.
And that's Elon Musk. I'm gonna get kicked off of Twitter now, but I mean it's true. So anyway, we start off with a developer who's coming into Chinatown to buy up everything. Robert Picardo is Forrester. He's like the right-hand man of Daniel Clamp. And he comes in, they bring in a TV and a VCR or something. They put it in the middle of the little tiny Chinese curio shop and push play on it. And it felt very much like Ed Begley Jr. in Santa with Muscles. Like, I won't come anywhere near you, but I'll give a TV with me on it talking to you to tell you that your life is over. But I says, I understand how you must be so attached to your business. I'm very attached to my business. You sell little teeny tiny things, and I make giant things. But that's the only difference between us. We're obviously the same people. So I've decided to increase my offer like tenfold. So because he wants to like change the Chinatown in New York to like a huge development thing for business and all this kind of stuff. And it was going to call it Clamp's Chinatown something. I forget what he's going to call it, but the slogan is perfect for the late 80s. Where business is oriented. Get it? Because the Orient. I should say also, Daniel Clamp is played by John Glover, who was one of my all-time favorite late 80s character actors.
Great. He's great in this.
He's basically playing the same character that he plays in Scrooged. But it's so good, I'll forgive it. Because it's exactly what it's supposed to be. The little old man says no, and but he has a terrible cough. And Forrester, as he's leaving, says, "All we have to do is wait. He'll just die, and then we'll take his stuff." And that's what happens. This is like 4 months later or whatever, he's dead. And they, instead of like taking all the stuff out of it and like I don't know, trying to sell it. Or whatever, they just bulldoze the entire building with Gizmo still inside.
Yes.
And he he's able to escape and hide in an alley for about 4.5 seconds before random people are there. And a guy picks it up and is like, if you want to find something weird, just go downtown, and picks up Gizmo, and we don't see him for a while. Gizmo is in very little of this movie.
Yes.
Like if you look at like the runtime of like the scenes that he is in, he's in maybe a fifth of the runtime of this movie, but he's the star, baby.
He's the guy.
And it is funny because they talk about later in a very self-referential way about all the money they're going to make merchandising Gizmo. But he's not really in the film. Again, here's what we should talk about.
I was going to say, this kind of hints at like maybe the overall allegory of this whole thing.
Yes, Joe Dante, who directed the first one and went on to direct my favorite movie, which we've talked about here, The Burbs, as well as other things. A very brilliant mind in directing. They wanted him to do a sequel. He said, no, we did the movie. The movie ends perfectly. There's no reason to do a sequel. It's just a cash grab. You know it's just a cash grab. I'm not going to be a part of your little cash grab. And they're like, fine, we'll find somebody else to be a part of our little cash grab. And we own the rights, not you, so we're going to do it. And they tried a bunch of times. They were in pre-production a few times. All these different ideas for how to do it. Different directors, different screenwriters, all this stuff never came to work. Never worked out. So they're like, fine, this is not going to work unless we get Joe Dante on board. So they backed up a gigantic dump truck full of money to his house and said, you can have complete creative control on this. Whatever you want to do with this movie, that's what we'll do. Because we are so desperate somehow to make millions of dollars off of little tiny Gizmo stuffed animals that we must make this movie. And he said, complete creative control. Is that what you said? Okay, cool. Let's do it. And he went about, I believe, and this is the allegory that we're talking about here, systematically destroying his own legacy with the first movie as a troll job to the producers who wanted to make a sequel. He actually sets out to make, and I think fully succeeds at making, a parody of the first one as a sequel to the first one, and also a parody of all other kinds of things. There's so many parodies of different kinds of television and stuff because there's a cable network that runs out of there. A parody of all kinds of monster movies, just all kinds of archetypes and stereotypes and tropes and everything, all put together. And he does it in a way that is brilliant, but also poking fun at his own masterwork that came out 5-6 years earlier. It's crazy.
I think, yeah, it's a parody of itself, and it's also a parody of the unnecessary sequel, which I think this was when this came out, kind of in the midst of a sequel heavy time, whether a movie warranted one or not. It almost reminded me, there were parts of this that were so self-effacing that it reminded me of when we talked about Team America and how they did that one scene that was just a big FU to the FCC because they were like, this puppet sex is too sexual, and they went back and made it a million times worse as like, and then it got approved because they never actually read it. It had a similar read to me at a lot of pieces of this. But what was funny was I like to, for movies I haven't seen yet and were like in this time period, I really like to go look at other people's takes on them, like other people's reviews before and after I watch them. And there were some people that were like, this was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And then there were people that were like, this is the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. So it definitely went over some people's heads because like, this is, without abandon, like mostly a lot of gags, but they're wrapped up in this framework of a complete satire on itself. So it's, if you miss the overarching thing here, of course it falls flat because it's mostly just a bunch of gags. But I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It got long at parts, but like for overall, when you are familiar with the backstory and you can kind of see what he was really going after, like even this idea of them taking over the city, like how many this thing we did now it's happening in the city. It's such like a fantastic thing. All the horror movies that happen in the city too, like just a lot of fun things here.
Right, like without like it could not possibly have known that when it was making fun of the idea, like it is making fun of a bunch of movies that came out decades after it. Like it is parodying. Like, I don't know, man. I stopped watching the Jurassic Park movies, but I know one of the most recent ones, like the not only do they get off the island, they're everywhere. Dinosaurs are everywhere, taking over the world. And they're like, you can keep it. But yeah, like that kind of whole thing of like, what would happen if instead of being localized to this very small place, they went everywhere? And one of the original pitches was to have the Gremlins literally take over New York City, but they realized that was going to be too expensive. So they decided to do it all localized in a giant skyscraper. So Joe Dante decided to basically screw with everything and come up with the most ridiculous things he possibly could. And one of the other things he satirized was the impending technological changes that were happening, like the idea of video calls and stuff being prevalent. Like you would call from one floor to another in this giant building, and you'd be able to have like basically do FaceTime, but you'd have to actually hold the receiver to your ear because nobody could conceive of like any of these other kinds of things.
Essentially,
right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, what if you could do a phone call, but there'd be a person on a 4-inch screen in front of you? Like, but they didn't change anything else around it. But I also love that there's the elevators. There's the fact that there's a guy on a loudspeaker telling you very sanitized version of things, and also very snarky things. And this is why it feels so much like Airplane or Naked Gun or whatever. Is that the idea of like there's the scene in Airplane where they're walking through the airport, and there's the person on the intercom who's just doing like verbal gags about stuff without actually being a part of the scene. And that's the same way here, where there's all we see is Phoebe Cates, who also works at this high-rise as a tour guide. She's walking to an elevator, and you hear on the intercom guy go, with the person who owns the car, license number KL5442, please report to the parking garage and move your vehicle. It is old and ugly.
That did give me Airplane vibes of when they're doing that scene by the curb drop off, and she's like, "We know what this is about. You want me to have an abortion?" Like, very, very, very similar. Very similar vibes.
But all of that is so great, and all of the stuff in this skyscraper, it doesn't really work properly because nobody got the bugs out of it. What does that remind you of going on right now with Elon Musk's stuff? Like, hey, let's change this around, but oops, we totally broke the code for everything else that's going on. Let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning. We'll try this again. Oh, hey, by the way, we got self-driving cars now.
Hackable self-driving cars.
Sure. Self-driving cars. And it's great because when they crash, inevitably, all the doors lock and you're locked in a fiery inferno. But it's totally fine because it's the future. Like that's the amount of like also everyone who works in that building worships Daniel Clamp.
Yes.
They worship him, even though when he shows up and walks around, he obviously has no clue what the fuck is going on. No. Everybody just go about your business. I'm going to stand around and pretend like I know what's happening. Like there's a point where because Billy so the people who pick up Gizmo are people who work in a genetics lab inside this skyscraper. The skyscraper has apartments in it. It has businesses that run 24 hours a day. So the place never shuts down. So there's a nightclub and an all-night food court on one of the floors. Like the offices that are there that run Clamp's development, business, real estate development stuff, they shut down for the night, but the nightclub opens up. So he's always got a stream of revenue coming through this giant skyscraper. So anyway, there's a genetics lab that's in there as well. He says, I knew there were going to be a problem tenant. We could have had 2 plastic surgeons and I don't know what the hell it was, something else in there, and electrolysis lab. But no, you said this would be much better. Anyway, these 2 twins who were fairly ubiquitous in movies at the time, rotund, red hair, mustache. They are working the lab, and Christopher Lee, the old horror actor who we're going to go on then to play Saruman and Count Dooku later in the 90s and early 2000s, is Dr. Catheter, which is just, again, an entirely made-up parody name. That's not a serious name you give to a character. You do that because you think it's a funny sounding name and it fits a doctor thing. He's very excited because he's supposed to be getting in a new shipment of diseases that he can test on animals. He's not a very nice man. But there's a delivery guy who shows up to deliver the stuff. And Julia Sweeney, who was like a year, maybe 2 years away from being on Saturday Night Live, plays the receptionist who's allergic to everything in the lab. I don't know if that was in the script, but I love that's the choice for her.
It's so good.
Just sneezing constantly and just yes. Oh, sorry. I'll sign for that for you. Oh, it's great. But anyway, the delivery guy can hear the one sound that Gizmo always makes, where he whistles almost in a very high pitched hum. Do, 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 says the little thing that he does. And so he's on another floor making another delivery right by Billy Peltzer, who hears it and immediately recognizes it as Gizmo. I was like, where did you hear that? It's on the lab. Somebody was humming it in floor 38 or whatever. And so Billy Peltzer just says, oh, it's not a coincidence. This must be Gizmo in the lab. I will go rescue him. And of course, it is Gizmo, and he's able to rescue him. And he is able to talk to Gizmo, who does not speak, about why he's there. It's like, oh, Gizmo, hey, you're wearing a black armband. And yes, indeed, Gizmo is wearing a black armband. Oh, is that for the kindly old Chinese man who was your caretaker? Did he die? I'm sorry, there's no way you would see a black armband wrapped around Gizmo and immediately jump to that and then say, is that what happened? Did he die? And Gizmo would be like, yeah, you're right. You totally did. It was tragic, actually. He was sick for a long time. He's in a better place now. Like, there's no conversation that you're having there with the Mogwai. It's just not possible. But this movie says, yes, it happened. And we are not allowed to argue with it because the movie is a parody.
Right.
If the movie took itself seriously, we could argue with it and say how stupid it is, but we're not allowed to because this movie is a parody, and that's the secret sauce. All of the stuff that happens is completely off the wall, zany, wacky, could never possibly happen. Like,
everything about it that's unjustified is justified by the fact that it's a parody. Like, there's a lot of stuff that, a normal viewing experience, you'd be like, well, that's inconsistent, or that doesn't work, and they're like, yes, we know.
we'll say like, well, that breaks all laws of physics, and it doesn't matter. The thing is that the first movie, as fantastical as it is, that these beings from another planet, a lost civilization or whatever, even exist, and then can be multiplied through water, killed via direct sunlight, and then metamorphose if they eat too late at night. that's all fantastical, but if you put a fantastical element inside the real world. Kingston Falls, a sleepy New England town, actually exists. Like not the name of the town. I'm saying like a town like that exists in the real world, and you take something fantastical and put it in there, and it still has to behave by the rules of the world, right? So we can look at that and go, okay, all the rules around the Gremlins may be kind of wonky, and we have to kind of accept them because they're brand new. But in that world, if cars could suddenly fly, we'd be like, that's
that
stupid.
Doesn't work.
That doesn't work because you're living in the real world. They've decided the sequel is a parody. So in a parody, anything can happen.
Anything flies, yeah.
And that's why it's such a brilliant choice to make it a parody. He is able to get Gizmo out of the lab in his weird little stealth mission that he does. But he takes him upstairs and puts him in a filing cabinet drawer. And that's when Daniel Clamp shows up. And Gizmo keeps opening the drawer from the inside. And Daniel Clamp keeps looking at it. It's like, what is that? Oh, it's a self-opening door. It opens every so often in case you need something. And Daniel Clamp goes, oh, when did we put those in? Like he has zero idea what's going on.
Like the notion of a self-opening door is just so perfect and such a good device of like could let anything in or out, right? Mm-hmm. And Clamp, like, to me that almost felt like a parody on the situation that the director was in of like, this guy just throws money at stuff, right? Like you said, Elon Musk, but I'm also like, this director was like, here's a bunch of money, you have full creative control. To me, this feels like that guy is the execs of like,
right.
I don't really know what's going on, but I'm throwing stuff at it or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like I'm throwing resources at it and I'm taking credit. Like that feels so like what he was given as a thing, but so much fun in a world where you're also supposed to be doing like groundbreaking stuff and he doesn't even know like that you've installed self-opening doors.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a so anyway, Marla, who is a wonderful caricature of a human being, fiery red hair, glasses, always smoking a Virginia Slim with some lipstick on the filter. Hello, Billy. How are you? No, it's fantastic. It's wonderful. Listen, my entire life is over. Would you like to come over for dinner? Like she's a very, very interesting person. And I thought played fantastically by Haviland. Her first name is Haviland something. But I don't recall her seeing her in anything else. But she was very, very good in this role. But anyway,
a scene stealer, one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a corporate climber. She wants very badly to become like a huge vice president thing. So she's gonna she's gonna ride the coattails of Billy, who's really impressed Daniel Clamp with his drawing of what he wants to do with the Chinatown project. And so she's basically like going to seduce her way into Billy's life so that when he goes up the ladder, he pulls her with him. So she says, let's do dinner. We're going to go do dinner, and we're going to go to this wonderful Canadian place. They clean the fish right at your table. And he's like, that sounds great. So because he's an idiot, he doesn't recognize that until it's too late that she's hitting on him. He thinks it's actually because he wants to move up too, because they live in a tiny little apartment and they want to start a family and they want to get married, but they don't have any money. So he wants to move up in the corporate ladder as well, and thinks that she is his ticket up. So that's why he agrees to go to dinner with her instead of his fiance, Phoebe Cates. But he says to Phoebe Cates, "You got to go and get Gizmo out of this drawer in my cubicle." And this is where we first start the whole she remembers all the rules. She remembers them, but she does not like Gizmo because she remembers what happened last time. And so she remembers the rules, but she doesn't remember what Gizmo looks like. Because, crucially, Gizmo gets out of the drawer, because he's a bad little mogwai, and he's walking around, and John Astin is playing a janitor. John Astin is the first guy to play Gomez Addams, the original TV show, and he's fixing a drinking fountain that is squirting water not far enough, so he cranks it all the way up, and it squirts water onto this thing, trickles down, and lands on Gizmo,
dun, dun,
and
dun.
he got wet, and so they create 4 new Mogwai. They are Mohawk, so named because of his mohawk.
Correct.
And then the 3 that I call Larry, Mo, Larry, and Curly. Like, they're absolutely a Three Stooges knockoff. There's the one that's more dour and in charge. There's the crazy one, and there's the dumb one. And like, this is basic. That's exactly who they are. They even have a slapstick thing where they're punching each other all the time.
Yes,
we basically put the Three Stooges in gremlin form. It's perfect. So they torture Gizmo and throw him into a ventilation shaft, and then 3 of them go away and do bad things, and one of them sticks around, the crazy one with the googly eyes, and he is playing with art supplies and everything, and then he climbs up on top of a model of like the Empire State Building. So when Phoebe Cates shows up, she sees Crazy One and says to him, "Oh, hi, Gizmo. Now Billy told me to bring you home, so that's what I'm gonna do." Like, that's not Gizmo. I mean, I know it's been like 5-6 years, but that's not Gizmo. So she brings him home and manages to get him fed before midnight, which is important. Meanwhile, the other 3 guys, they go down to the frozen yogurt bar, which is right outside of the nightclub, and after midnight they eat a bunch of toppings. There's a guy who is in the scene in the yogurt bar, who is the one of the guys who works behind the counter, and that is played by the character, the actor Jason Presson. Jason Presson was in Joe Dante's movie Explorers, about 3 kids that go to space. They somehow build a spaceship and go to space. It's a really cool coming of age movie from the mid 80s, with River Phoenix and Ethan Hawke play the other 2 kids, and Jason Presson plays his other kid in the movie, and really didn't go on to do anything else. But Joe Dante loved working with him so much, he called him. He hadn't worked in years, and said, "Would you like to be in this, a small part in my movie?" And that's what Joe Dante does with the people that he works with. I love that about Joe Dante.
That's awesome.
So he's a very small part.
He did that with Gizmo too. He was like, "You were in this movie forever ago. Do you want to be in this?"
Hey G, how's it going? Yeah, it's Joe. I was just thinking, we were talking, getting the band back together.
Part that would be perfect for you.
I got this part that would be perfect for you.
Anyway, you don't even have to audition.
No, you don't. They just told me I could do whatever I want. Full creative control, so I'm the casting director.
I'm doing this.
Billy's date with Marla, his boss, at the Canadian restaurant, which is great because they're in a booth, but part of the booth is like a grizzly bear that is like right here. So in order to talk to somebody who's sitting at the other part of the booth, you have to like look around the grizzly bear head. Like, it is, again, it's a parody of the thing that was happening at the time, where like restaurants that everybody talked about would like spring up and be, you couldn't get a table at all for like 6 months, and then they went under like that. And they were always like, it's this really great fusion between Norwegian food and sushi. And I'm like, no. Like, so like a Canadian restaurant where they clean the fish at your table makes perfect sense as in the parody version of it. And of course, the waiter is dressed up like a Mountie. And he comes out, "Would you like to try our dessert? It's our favorite. It's the chocolate mousse. Could I cut you an antler, sir?" It's just a big sculpted, like a chocolate bunny for Easter, but it's a mousse. It's the chocolate mousse. Like, again, it's a stupid gag, but it works because this movie has decided itself. We are stupid. We are doing as many stupid things as possible. It is a how many gags can we cram into each minute of film movie?
Yes.
And I think it totally works on that thing.
That chocolate mousse thing where you had said like airplane, that was what that like stuff like that was very surely you can't be serious. Like that felt very very much in that world.
Anyway, so when Billy gets back to the apartment, he's got some lipstick on his face because Marla insisted on kissing him goodbye. And Billy didn't check. Like, this is a woman who wears a lot of lipstick, and she kissed you on the face, and you went home without like checking the mirror or something. Come on.
It is like disheveled too.
Yes, Phoebe Cates knows that something's up because he broke off her date, and he saw him leaving with his boss, who she knows is whatever. So like if we survive tonight, you're in big trouble. That's what she says later in the film. But anyway,
at home taking care of the kid gremlin.
I know exactly the child gremlin. So as soon as Billy gets it, this is not Gizmo. I don't know what you're doing. Let's. He's not mad at her. Let's go back and we're gonna find Gizmo. So as soon as he gets there, they realize that there are other Mogwai / gremlins. Oh no, it's there was a thing in the toppings of a furry thing. It was disgusting. And they look at the clock. It's after midnight, and they've eaten. What are we going to do? Well, here's what we got to do. We're going to go, and we're going to shut down the water in the entire building. So he goes, and he finds it, and he's going to attack it with an axe. But, of course, they have a perfect security system, so they find him, and they send up a security guard, played by Rick Dukeman from The Burbs. And every time I watch this, I think to myself, that's so awesome that Joe Dante put him in it, but Joe Dante should have made the part bigger. Like, Rick Dukeman was so good in The Burbs, which come out like the year before this. And like the security guard who thinks he's basically Clint Eastwood, like he thinks he's Dirty Harry. He's like, hey, you come on, kid, let's go. I'm taking you downtown. But like, he's the type of guy who thinks that about himself, but also is a bumbling idiot.
Correct. In no way.
And tries to use his machismo to like outthink the gremlins who are ahead of him at every turn. That guy's a great guy to have along for the entire ride of your movie.
Yeah.
But instead, he's got one scene where he stops him from hacking at it with an axe and steals. They find Gizmo. No, they don't find Gizmo yet. That's right. He has Crazy Gremlin Crazy Mogwai in his little satchel. Billy does. So he takes the satchel. Like, I wouldn't look in there if I were you. Yeah, but you ain't me, are ya? Flips it open, looks inside, and it bites part of his nose off. And then runs away as the guy shoots at it. The security guard shoots at it and says, we got to stop him before he eats something. He already ate something. I'm taking you downtown, kid. You're crazy. So then Billy gets arrested. And Phoebe Cates has to bust him out of jail at like 6 a.m. And so they've been running around for 6 hours. They ate, so now they're metamorphosing into the evil things. It's been 6 hours, which is honestly, in a movie that's all about gags and stuff like that, it's a very clever way to like make the time pass.
Yes.
Like you have to make the time pass for some. There's a reason why they weren't able to find them during these 6 hours, because Billy was in jail. Honestly, that's a pretty decent way of doing things. But also, they're metamorphosing, so they can't now become. There can't be more of them, right?
There is like such a fine line of the rules you can break in a parody, I feel like, because it still has to feel like a movie.
Yep.
But you're allowed to break the rules the rules of your own world in some ways. But like things like that, like the time passing, at least you can't break the rules that keep the story on track, I guess. Like
right.
It's tricky. It's tricky, but that's a really good call of like it did justify the time passing.
Yeah. So they are able to get him back into the building, but even though he was arrested there, and he goes to the security office and says, "Oh, so you, even though you were arrested last night, you decided to come back. What great work ethic." And like he tries to explain to everyone working in the security offices what the rules are, and they have all the questions that somebody like me would have about rules. Like, okay, wait a minute. So, what if they eat something like a bagel or whatever at like 10 p.m.? So it's totally fine. But a caraway seed gets stuck in their teeth and they swallow it after midnight. Now, he didn't technically eat it before midnight, like after midnight, but he kind of did. I mean, would that work? Oh, what if they eat something on a plane and cross time zones? I mean, what happens there? And that is just long enough for the evil gremlins to come out and attack them, which is great, or at least Mohawk to do it. The Three Stooges have decided to infiltrate a cooking show called Microwave with Marge. Where it's like this dish used to take 5 hours in the oven, but now with a microwave oven, it takes 12 minutes. Just
there was this great short series when YouTube was like kind of first swelling up as a thing called My Drunk Kitchen. It was just this girl making really unimpressive foods while she was drunk, of just like grilled cheese or whatever, and that kind of reminded me of this because it was just a praise of the use of the microwave as a really fun idea in this, especially for such a advanced technology world. They were just like, look at the microwave.
So they throw a bunch of metal utensils and pots into the microwave and turn it on high, and it explodes. And there's a fire, and so the sprinkler system turns on, which of course then makes them multiply several hundred times over. There is a I believe it is a parody of the way that this group is treated in other films, but it may also just be a thing that they did in the 80s anyway, because they had no other gag. But Gary Watanabe plays Mr. Katsuji, who is a Japanese tourist who just has cameras like on them all the time, taking pictures. And I choose to believe Joe Dante is doing a send-up of this trope and how stupid it is. But he may just be doing the trope because that's what you did as
a common trope. Then,
it's just a thing. You just did it. That was the joke. But there's also Robert Prosky, who is fairly ubiquitous in the late 80s, early 90s. Mrs. Doubtfire, Last Action Hero. Well, there's another one too, I'm forgetting. But he's this very sweet old grandpa type character, and he is a guy who runs we're going to show old scary movies at 3 a.m. TV show on this cable network, and so he always wanted to be Walter Cronkite. Like, he got into broadcasting because that's what he wanted to do, but instead he's showing scary movies at 3 a.m. But he realizes, being in the building while this is going crazy, that this is his big break. So he basically gets Gary Watanabe to be his cameraman, and they're going to film everything and do reports on it. So that's going there. Oh, also Dick Miller, who was Murray Futterman in the first movie. He was attacked by the Gremlins but survived. They do a thing where now he's got PTSD about all of that, and he's just getting over it 5 years later. So he's going to take a vacation to the city and get over his whole thing at Gremlins. Too bad. But he and his wife are there. So that's another thing. So now they break into the genetics lab. The Gremlins do, and they start drinking potions and stuff. Because like you do. One of them is a vegetable medley, which turns him into a vegetable gremlin. It's just a gremlin who's got vegetables growing out of him. That's basically all it is. One of them turns himself into pure electricity, which feels like that's where you're breaking the laws of physics. I don't know how that works, but it's very crucial to the end of the film. So he just bounces around everywhere and goes into the electrical wires or whatever. Oh, at one point, this is when Billy shows up to the belly puns. Shows up to the the genetics lab and enlists the help of Dr. Catheter, Christopher Lee, to try and kill these things. So he has a gun locker with all kinds of like guns in it, and before Christopher Lee can shoot all of the gremlins, he is electrocuted by electricity gremlin, because of course he is. But also there's one gremlin that drinks brain hormone, is what they call it. I trust that's not the brain hormone that creature is drinking. And he becomes super smart. And he has the voice of Tony Randall from The Odd Couple.
Phenomenal.
And when he wears glasses.
So phenomenal. Oh my God.
And he becomes the de facto star of this movie. Like, if you see press clippings and stuff from the time, any of the like any photos or anything, like the most famous part of Gremlins 2 is the very smart gremlin. And honestly, like, that was the guy I think they could have spun off into a third Gremlin movie, is this gremlin, the smart one who has strategy and can direct his minions to do whatever, because he is very smart, has all these really highfalutin. He went to Yale. This gremlin absolutely went to Yale. But at one point he's like, he recognizes how smart this is. He sees that one of the gremlins has drank bat hormone or whatever. And immediately, because that's how genetics work. If you drink a potion, you immediately become the thing. That's how that works. So a gremlin basically becomes a bat hybrid. And then he takes genetic sunblock, which is the thing that exists, and injects it directly into the neck of the bat creature. The brain gremlin does this. And he says, this was developed for our nocturnal friends to allow them to move freely during the day. But for you, now you can take over the town. And so he injects him with it, and they break out a window, and out flies the bat gremlin. The bat gremlin just so happens to attack Murray Futterman, the PTSD guy from the first movie, who is able to thwart him by grabbing it by the legs and throwing it into a puddle of wet, fresh cement, where it then is able to extricate for itself from there and fly up to a tower on an old church and turn into a gargoyle, which I thought was a really cool visual, but also ultimately, like, yeah. I don't know. There was a lot. One of them actually got out. One of them did.
Yes.
There's more than enough genetic sunblock to put in the necks of, I don't know, at least a dozen others. There's not an infinite supply, but you could have sent out 12 other ones. I think the reason you had to be a bat is because he had to fly, because they were way up high in the sky. You couldn't send out ones that couldn't fly out of that window you broke. So that's why you had to do it that way. But you could have figured out a way. Okay, so hey, I'm gonna need 12 volunteers, says the brain gremlin. Come with me. You carry this sunblock stuff. Don't drop it. And you carry the lion genetic material and the grizzly bear genetic material and the shark that can walk on land genetic material. And let's all meet down in the lobby. And then, at this point, the brain gremlin, I think, was not thinking big enough. That's all I'm going to say.
That's very true. Did Tony Randall do a bunch of voiceover work after this? Because he should have.
Oh, he was already doing it. But yeah, no, he was so good at that.
Just fantastic. What it adds to that gremlin is unbelievable. And I also like that gremlin is also kind of personal. He's talking to people. He wants civilization just like everybody does. It's a really considering it's Gremlins, it's a pretty rich character, because it's the only one that doesn't have a perfunctory blend of something. Him being the mastermind of them it makes it a really, really fun piece of the movie, I think.
Yeah. Because there is a point where he is interviewed by Grandpa Vampire, because that's what he is. And he says one of them is somehow able to talk, and he's going to talk with us right now. Now, Creature, may I call you Creature? Yes, of course. Creature, what is it that you want? Well, I think what we want, Chuck, is what everyone wants: civilization. And like he does this whole thing about what it's all perfectly written out, perfectly delivered by Tony Randall. It's like, now, see, here, this my friend here, not civilized in any way, but nor am I. Shoots him in the face with a gun. Now, was that civilized? No. Fun, yes, but in no way civilized. It's because the whole thing is that he's smart, but he's also a gremlin, so he must make mischief.
Of course.
At least he can be erudite while he does it. There was another little gag in here. Leonard Maltin, the very famous movie critic, very famously at the time Gremlins 1 came out, panned it, hated it, thought it was absolute dreck and one of the worst things that had ever happened in movies. So Joe Dante hired him to come on and do basically that review of Gremlins 1 and then be attacked and eaten by gremlins in Gremlins 2.
I didn't know that. That's so fun.
Leonard Maltin, to his credit, played along with the gag, but I did think it was very funny that they did that, because that was very funny.
That is fun.
There's a of course, also in this giant high-rise, there is a movie theater that is showing, I don't know, some Disney movie or something, right? And the Gremlins break into the projection booth and start showing a 1940s nudie pic, which is just bare-chested girls bouncing up and down playing volleyball, which was amazing. The height of pornography in 1948. And so they're showing that, where they should be showing, like, cute little, Benji go home kind of stuff, right? Whatever. And so the projectionist says, "Call the union, I quit," and he leaves, which is a wonderful thing to think of now, a union for projectionists existing in this day and age. But anyway, so a mother from the theater is complaining to the head usher, who goes, "I will handle this." And he walks down, and here's the thing: whatever Disney movie was playing, right, has switched to a 1940s nudie pic, right? The only people who apparently have a problem with that is that mother and her daughter.
Yeah, everyone
else is just sitting there, rapt, watching the screen, including Hulk Hogan, who is sitting there on the aisle, and the head usher walks up and says, "Excuse me, Mr. Hogan? Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disturb you. We have gremlins in the production booth." "Gremlins? Where, brother?" And he turns around and looks up at the projection booth, and he cuts a promo on the gremlins in the production booth. Does the Hulkster have to come up there? Did the Hulkster have to start a feud with the Gremsters?
Significantly better than Santa with muscles. I still don't know if Hulk Hogan knew what was going on, but it worked great. It was perfect.
He says people come here to watch a movie. People pay good money to come here and eat popcorn, as he crushes that thing of popcorn and it flies everywhere, and watch a movie, and they're not going to be stopped by the likes of you. Do I have to come up there? And then they switch it back, and then he stops looking up at the projection booth and looks right at the camera and says, "Sorry, folks, it won't happen again." So he breaks the fourth wall. It's just like the only time that happens in the whole movie. And then it sits down, and so it's the idea that it was supposed to be our theater also experiencing the technical difficulties, which it was. Like, if you watch it in the theater, the film looks like it breaks apart, right? And it's supposed to stay that way, and it did in the theaters for several seconds. On the home video, it's like a second, and then you see the shapes of the gremlins, right? But they were very upset. The studio was very concerned. People would get up and leave the theater if they thought the movie had actually collapsed,
malfunctioned,
like torn apart. And like Joe is like, not going to do that. And test audiences actually loved this part because of the shadow puppets with the gremlins. It felt like it was part of the part of the show that they were actually being a part of.
Felt very Muppets. In that way,
so, that was
the show inside
but it's so funny the way that the producers like, oh no, people will get up and leave our picture
in 8 seconds or whatever, too. Like, how fast do you even stand up?
I know, it's so dumb. So all of that is happening. Daniel Clamp. Oh, by the way, Daniel Clamp. There's a fantastic scene which makes him even more like Elon Musk. He's like, he just sits in his desk. Hey, Brenda, did you shred those documents I gave you? I'm just finishing up now, sir. Okay. Hey, let's do some memos. Okay. And he starts reading out what he wants her to type because he's an idiot. And he's, hey,
we should also mention like the logo too for Clamp is the flattened globe with the sea.
He's crushing the earth
with
his
earth,
giant sea. He says, he's trying. Hey, will you tell the people in Chinatown to do some spontaneous outpouring of thanks and gratitude for my tearing down all their buildings and building up better buildings? So instructs the people there to do an outpouring of a spontaneous gratitude.
Correct.
Is a perfect thing for a billionaire to say. But anyway, a gremlin sneaks in and puts a mousetrap in the sandwich that Brenda is eating while she's working. So she hears the snap and walks out in there and sees the gremlin wearing Brenda's clothes, and then he fights with the gremlin and puts it through the paper shredder. And so this is
like also the tipping point where this movie just mostly turns into a bunch of gags. And it's fun because they earned it in the beginning of the movie, I feel like, up until this point, and then it kind of flips a little bit. Once everybody started drinking their genetics, it kind of gets like very gag happy, but it does feel earned from there out until we kind of get to the climax.
So Clamp is on board with Billy. Like, he totally accepts that these things are creatures. They're here. He accepts all the rules. He's totally on board. How can I make myself the hero of this story is where he now falls into this thing. We got to keep a lid on it. Make sure there's no media that gets wind of this. This can never get out. But I'm going to go talk to them and placate them because they have a plan. We got to set all the clocks in the building forward 3 hours to make them all think it's going to be sunset. And they'll all gather in the lobby because as soon as the sun goes down, they can leave the lobby and take over New York. So what you're going to do is put up a big barrier, like a big banner, something that they can't see through outside the thing. And then when they're on the lobby, when it's still sunny out, you're going to drop the banner and they're all going to die. And he says, fantastic. It's a wonderful plan. I'm going to be the hero. So he has a secret exit that he uses that is like some weird pneumatic tube that brings him up through a manhole cover right outside the building. Yeah, the Cody Vader. He's got his own Cody Vader. He's got a Clamp-O-Vader.
Okay, Clamp-O-Vader.
He's got a Clamp-O-Vader. But so he's trying to placate the press. Like, what's going on in there, sir? What do you? I'm going to tell you what I always tell you, Sheila. I don't know. Which is a wonderful thing. Which is like so good. I'll say what I always tell you. I don't know. This, by the way, I should mention the script written by Charlie Haas. No word if there was a dual credit for Shelton Benjamin, but I did think that was very funny. That was Charlie Haas. No, not the same one, surely.
Because I knew Hulk was in it. I was like, I don't think Charlie Haas like carries the same weight as like a Hulk Hogan. I was like, was there a scene in here where they fought? Like,
nope.
What happened? But I did see that in the credits and laughed.
No, that was very funny. So this is where. Oh, by the way, Mohawk drinks spider genetics and turns into a giant spider gremlin.
Of course.
Forgot about that. Meanwhile, Gizmo has been being tortured on and off for the better part of the movie by these gremlins. They tie him to a train track and run toy trains into him, all kinds of stuff. But he's able to escape. And earlier in the film, we saw him watching Rambo 3, and he thought it was the coolest thing ever. So when he escapes, he transforms himself into Rambo. He ties a little thing of red cloth around his head as much as he can because of the ears. And he lifts weights. And when I say lifts weights, he has one weight held above his head that can't have more than 10 pounds on it, and somehow he still falls through the floor. It's a gag for the sake of being a gag, but it doesn't actually work in any way. And then he fashions a bow and arrow out of a paperclip and a rubber band. And then he sticks a bottle of whiteout on the end of a pencil to be his flaming arrow. And he is able to... Marla, by the way, leaves her office. She's oblivious to this whole thing happening.
Of course.
And she walks out, and she is caught in the spider web of Mohawk. And then Phoebe Cates finds her and tries to extricate her from the web. They agree to have a truce or whatever. It's like, listen, okay, I did have designs on Billy, but I never got to first base, okay? And so
she's so great.
She's so great.
Funny.
I did have designs on him, but never got to first base. And so they're trying to get her out of the web, and there comes evil Mohawk Spider, who is ostensibly, he was the ringleader of the first Gremlins the first Mogwai that came out of Gizmo. There's the character of Stripe in the first Gremlins, and this is a version of that. And so you'd be forgiven to think this is the big bad. There's going to be one Gremlin left at the end of this whole thing that they're going to have to face, who didn't get killed by the big plan, because that's what happened in the first one. And this is going to be that one that is that Gremlin. No, because Gizmo comes out of the ventilation shaft, lights his little bottle of whiteout arrow on fire, and just like this, shoots it at the the Mohawk Spider, who then bursts into flames, because apparently spiders are very flammable.
Evidently.
And burns to death. This is when Billy shows up, and they find this is where he's reunited with Gizmo, and everything. Gizmo's now put in the bag, and everything's fine. And so it's that Gizmo and Phoebe Cates and Marla, they're all together, and they're and Murray got into the building somehow as well. So they're little ragtag group of commandos that are going to take this whole thing. So as is the plan is going to perfectly, all the Gremlins have arrived in the lobby, and they're minutes away from dropping the big, because he put up a big sheet that has the night sky crudely painted on it. And there's the fire chief walks up to Daniel Clamp, who's standing there as they're raising a crane with the sheet on it, right? And the fire chief says, "Hey, Mr. Clamp, what's going on here?" "Well, don't you see that we've set all the clocks in the building ahead 3 hours? All the Gremlins are going to gather in the lobby, and then we're going to drop the sheet, and the sunlight's going to pour through the big windows and fry them." And the fire chief says, "Okay, sounds good." Like, he doesn't question that at all.
Not a bit.
Not at all. Just like, no, whatever you say goes, Mr. Clamp.
Sure.
And that's it. But of course, there's a thunderstorm that brews, and the sunlight goes behind a very dark cloud, and there's no sunlight to come through. Now, obviously, sunlight is sunlight.
Right.
So, like, there's still the UV rays are penetrating. It should be able to kill a few of them anyway, but we won't go into that. I should mention also this. I forgot about this. I don't know how I forgot about this. In the genetics lab, there is apparently a beaker of potion that if you are a lady, it turns you into a dude, and if you are a dude, it turns you into a lady. Now, crucially, Gremlins are asexual.
Right.
They do not require any kind of intercourse, no gestation period. They
water.
They reproduce asexually. They are not men or women or anything. But this particular gremlin drinks the potion and becomes a very sexy lady gremlin. Like it's got
boobs.
Huge boobs, very perfectly toned calves in high heels,
huge
long,
lips,
green, luscious hair, collagen-infused lips,
amazing,
big fluttery eyelashes, and it immediately has designs on Robert Picardo, who plays Forster, the security chief, and chases him like Miss Piggy chasing Kermit the Frog, through the whole building. Right now, this happened, I don't know, 20 minutes before this next scene I'm going to describe. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that he got away,
right?
Or she had her way with him and then left, or whatever, right? Because in this next scene, there is a full-on musical number of the brain gremlins singing "New York, New York." Okay, if I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. And then they cut from that part of the musical number to Rhapsody in Blue. Dun, 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 dun. You've heard that song in commercials and everywhere for years and years and years. Anyway, there's a whole thing with apparently the Gremlins. So again, it holds up to zero scrutiny, but it doesn't have to because it's a parody. Apparently the Gremlins have put together a giant printed cutout face of the lady gremlin, and they've cut it up into perfect hexagons so they can hold it up above their heads, so the shot that goes down below, and then they can move it in a really fun little wave thing, and then one of them will spiral open, and up from below will be the lady gremlin, who's just standing there looking fetching. It is entirely ridiculous and very funny. And you think, oh, okay, well then everyone, all the bad guys are in the lobby. So let's do it. Let's light them up. Let's light them on fire. Can't do that though. But earlier, somehow, Peltzer was able to put the electricity gremlin, trap it in the phone system on hold. Okay, I don't know how he did it. It doesn't make any sense to me either. Parody, it doesn't have to. But he tells Murray Fetterman to take a giant hose, a fire hose, and point it at all the gremlins and douse them with water. And Murray Fetterman goes, "You're nuts." And he says, "Trust me." Okay. You can't go from "you're nuts, this is obviously not going to work" to "trust me, sure, all whatever right. You say. All right. There's got to be some, you have to explain to me your process here before I agree to do this thing.
Or create that urgency where he can't.
Right.
Like it wasn't that urgent.
No. So he does. He wets them all down with the hose. And Phoebe Cates is able to transfer the call from Clamp's office up there to the lobby, and then Billy holds the phone receiver out toward the lobby, and the electricity gremlin vaults from within the phone and bounces around all of the very freshly wet gremlins, thus electrocuting all of them. And they all die, including the brain gremlin, who is able, while dying, to wheeze out, I forgot also, one of the gremlins is the Wicked Witch of the West. They pan to it, and it's right. Wearing a witch hat and goes, "I'm melting, what a world. This, by the way, all of this is being recorded and broadcast live over the Clamp News Network by Grandpa Vampire and his Japanese tourist stereotype cameraman. They're recording it from inside giant trash cans, like the trash cans like at McDonald's that you put the tray into and dip everything into. Ridiculous. Daniel Clamp, right after this happens, busts through the front door with a SWAT team. He is himself in full SWAT regalia,
so good.
with an AR-15 style rifle. And so they came in. I guess they were going to shoot all of them, but they didn't have to because they're all dead, electrocuted in a big puddle of green goop. This is where Daniel Clamp decides to make Billy president of design or whatever. And he sees Marla without her glasses for the first time and falls instantly in love with her because of course he does. He sees Gizmo, and Billy's fine with him seeing Gizmo because he's like, you know what I see when I look at him? Little suction cup dolls on the inside of passenger windows, which was actually a bestseller for them. You can still buy them on eBay. You can still buy the little suction cup Gizmos, and I thought about buying one just to have as a prop to be like, see, you can buy one, but they were too expensive. This was all very nicely wrapped up in a neat little package until the final scene, where the sexy lady gremlin was in the lobby,
yes,
doing her part of the musical number.
Correct.
Right before she was doused with water, but apparently she wasn't. She left after doing her part of the musical number to go back up to the bathroom on a higher floor where she had locked up Forrester, the head of security, who has lipstick all over his face and he's all disheveled. He's been he's got his pants are unbuckled. It's not a good sign. And she is in a full wedding dress and has decided she is going to marry him. And he tries to back away as far as he possibly can. And she keeps getting closer and closer, making kissy faces at him. And the camera goes to him, and he goes, well. He's like, well, you know what? I mean, she's kind of hot for a gremlin.
She's a sexy gremlin.
You know, so there's the end of Gremlins 2, the new batch.
It's so funny. It's such a funny thing to end on because, like, of course you would end on the romance. I don't know. The opening to you know what I mean? Like it can't, something that is making fun of sequels is hard cannot end on a resolved note. It has to end on something that is exactly that perfectly like silly and open.
So now Robert Picardo in Gremlins 3 is the main character who is on the run from the authorities with his gremlin wife, whom he loves very much and has had several kids with.
Of course.
She's trying to make sure she can become a legal citizen of America, but first he's got to get her green card.
Hey, nailed it.
So it is very funny that they turned what is apparently like interspecies rape by the sexy female gremlin of Robert Picardo into a heartwarming story where she makes an honest man out of him. Like, it's so nice, you know. It's good. It's I don't think we missed anything big. That's it. Like, it is.
Well, there's not really anything big to miss,
right?
In the full movie outside of those plot points, because it is gag heavy, but in a really, really great way. Like, it's so much fun. I'm keeping the flick. Definitely watch it if you are into kind of the comedy that Alex referenced before of A, the self-referential stuff, and B, like Police Academy, Naked Gun, Airplane type-esque movies, because there's a lot of those beats of humor in here. But this was so fun in that I don't know if I've ever seen a movie admit so much that it's an unnecessary sequel, and I think more should.
Yes, I forgot here now. One of the storylines that was considered was to send them to Las Vegas. Another was to send them to the planet Mars. So I'm glad that they decided to do this because those would have been a little.
No, it's perfect. Vegas would have been all right, I think, but New York was perfect.
Yeah, this is good. He received a budget triple that of the original film. He could.
That's why he did it. That Hulkster money, bro.
Oh man, he just decided to do whatever the hell he wanted. I love it.
How did this? I didn't actually see that. How did this do at like the box office?
It was a flop.
Really?
But the estimates are $50 million budget, box office $41 million.
Ooh,
so didn't make its money back.
Took a loss.
But it has gained all kinds of
acclaim,
cult status, you know. And one of the big reasons was a few years ago the amazing Key and Peele sketch.
Oh my gosh, so great!
That people like who did not know such a movie existed thought that everything that Jordan Peele was talking about in that sketch was fake. And no, there's at the end of the sketch they have to put this. Everything in this sketch actually happened in the movie, and it is when of course when it's somebody as brilliant as Key and Peele who put it together, the way that they describe everything is
perfect.
So perfect. If you have never seen the sketch, it's very easily Googleable. It's so great. Yeah.
Keeping the flick.
Oh yeah.
Free to watch on HBO Max and Amazon Prime if those are included.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just if you're into that kind of stuff, this is great. And if you're not, what's wrong with you? You should be.
I would say there are a lot of people who know of the first one, have seen the first one maybe multiple times, who haven't seen the second one.
Definitely worth it. Definitely worth
it. It is one of those. Oh, I forgot to mention. I forget somebody in the movie brings up Abraham Lincoln. I don't know why. Somebody brings up Abraham Lincoln, and Phoebe Cates says, don't mention Lincoln. The worst thing ever happened to me on Lincoln's birthday. And she launches into a parody of the monologue from the first film. And everyone's like, oh God, not this again.
Again?
Even Billy's like, honey, we don't have time for this, honey. Like it's like, no, I was walking home from school and a guy came out of the woods and wearing a trench coat and a top hat with a fake beard, and like she was flashed by some guy when she was 8 years old. And it's such a perfect parody of the first movie's like most famous scene, and Phoebe Cates commits so hard to the bit. I can't believe I almost forgot to mention it. It is such a great little scene. Watch the first monologue, which is easily found as a scene on YouTube, and then watch this monologue. It's just Phoebe Cates making fun of herself, and it's so. I love when actors are good sports about that kind of stuff.
Yes,
it was so great. Loved it.
Yes,
loved it. This is one of those things that I always forget because it always a couple of years will always go by unfailingly between viewings of this or even parts of it, and I'm always amazed by how funny it is.
It's great.
Like I can't remember. I should have wrote down some of the things that the intercom guy says at certain points. Like the elevator doors, they're not elevator doors. There's revolving doors that are automatic and they always malfunction. And at one point, Billy and Phoebe Cates are walking through one of the regular doors as a team of maintenance guys trying to use the jaws of life to get a woman out of these revolving doors. And like the revolving doors are there for your protection. However, right now they are not in use. Like it's just this, like that kind of a thing. But there's this other one like attention. The electrical systems in the building are malfunctioning. Please try not to notice. Like just the most like sweep it under the rug bullshit. Oh God, it's so much fun. I really wholeheartedly recommend it if you have not seen it. And even if you have, it's probably been too long. Watch it again.
Dust her off. It's a good one.
Yeah, it is. Thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for your patience in this coming a few days after it normally would. We had some stuff happen last week, but we're back on schedule-ish. We'll talk more the next time. I don't know what we're gonna. Yeah, probably who knows. But until then, we'll tell you whether or not we want to get the flick out of here. Bye, everybody.
RESPECT. Click the subscribe button and find out what it means to me. Nah, that doesn't have a ring to it. But if you like videos about real news stories that are funny, stupid, or weird, subscribe now.